to write a book is a very simple question with a kind of complicated answer. I find that a lot of people who are outside of the writing community, for example, family and friends and acquaintances, when I tell them I have a book coming out, they say, oh, how do you write a book? Because I've tried and I never was able to finish, or I've always thought about it, but I've never actually gotten around to doing it. And I think there are a lot of people out there that are at that stage in their writing career where they want to write a book, but they can't quite figure out how to do it. So this video is all about my tips for how to write a book. Again, this is my process, things that have worked for me that will hopefully work for you. This is not the only way to write a book. Don't let anyone go telling you that I told you this was the only way to write a book, because it's not. But these are steps for writing a book that have worked for me that will hopefully work for you. So let's get into it. So let's start at the beginning, and the beginning of how to write a book is an idea. Ideas are great because it's easy to start with an idea. Later on, when you're like trying to develop more ideas, that's where it may become difficult. But a lot of people, especially if you want to write, if you already want to write a book, you probably have an idea for something in mind. Something that I'll do is on my phone, I have the Notes app because I have an iPhone, but whatever Notes app is in your phone. And whenever I get inspired and think of an idea, I'll go on my phone and I'll type down the idea, just like a paragraph of whatever came into my head. One, so that I don't forget it later, because if I wait until I get to a computer, probably I'll forget it, or I'll convince myself that it's a bad idea. And two, just because it's simple, I put it down and it's done. So at a certain point, you'll kind of have a roster of ideas from various forms of inspiration. If you are really stuck on an idea, what I like to do is that I'll go out in the world, I'll take a walk, I'll go explore downtown, I'll go out for dinner with a friend, I'll do things where I can kind of see people and observe them, and that kind of helps generate ideas for me. For some people, it can also be consuming media, so watching TV shows, movies, reading books. Those sorts of things can also help generate ideas. But once you've got your roster of ideas, that's really the start. And now it's deciding which ideas have legs, aka which ideas can you actually roll with and create a feasible story. For this, I check through all my ideas and I try and think, which of these can I actually write about for a long time? So like if my idea is like, this dog can talk, do I have more ideas about what that book can be, or is that really as far as I've ever gotten? And I try and narrow it down to the most fleshed out ideas, because those tend to be the ones that I can actually write about the most. And from there, when you have your short list of ideas that you think you'll actually follow through with, that you'll actually be able to write a 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 word book on, then that's great. You've got that perfect short list. And from there, I start to think about market. This is a very controversial, I will tell you. A lot of people will say, don't write to the market, don't think about the market, whatever. My personal opinion is, at the end of the day, you want to write what you want to write. So if you want to write something off market and that's what makes you happy, go for it. You may have a harder journey in traditional publishing, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Me personally, pursuing traditional publishing, I think about the market because I don't want to be struggle busing. I've struggle bussed in the past and it is difficult. My second book was a portal fantasy. It also had a lot of other issues, but like that was a really big sticking point and an issue that I had, and it made the journey really long. Of course, that book wasn't successful and I would never go back to it, but it made something a lot lengthier than it maybe could have been. If I had known portal fantasy was on the outs, maybe I would have written it as an urban fantasy, or I would have written it as a high fantasy and just chosen one to stick in. So I find that it's helpful if you pay attention to the market. So Publishers Marketplace, they have an email they'll send out with all the deals. You can look up on Twitter, you can look up book deals and see what recent deals are announced. You want to look at the deals that are being announced because they're like 2 years ahead, and so you can still kind of be part of an emerging you can still pay attention to trends that are happening now by looking at the deal reports. I wouldn't say like hop on a trend, but it's good to pay attention. So for example, if you were thinking of, do I want to write a high fantasy book or do I want to write an urban fantasy book? And you're finding that a lot of high fantasy is selling, but not a lot of urban fantasy is selling. And you are equally fine with writing either or. Maybe you'll decide you want to write a high fantasy because that's what's selling right now. Or that's what's selling 2 years ahead because you're looking at deal announcements. Once you're looking at books in the bookstore, it's kind of too late at that point because that book was like 2 years back that they sold that, and you want to kind of look at things that are selling for now or the future. So that's what I mean when I say paying attention to the market. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think you need to hop on trends because trends come and go, but I think it's good to kind of have an idea of how much legs your idea may have in the traditional publishing industry if that's what you're looking for. Step 2 is, there's steps now. I don't know. There's steps now. But step 2 is research and preparation. So thinking about your idea, is there anything that you need to know before you can start writing this? For example, you've decided to write a book with a main character and he's a farmer. Do you know anything about farming? Anything at all about farming? If you know zero, it may be hard for you to start writing because you're gonna write all about this boy's life on a farm and then in your head know that you don't know anything whatsoever about farming. This research doesn't have to be super extensive in the beginning. It depends on how you are as a person. Some people love researching. They love to research the shit out of stuff, like going real wide with it. I personally don't like to that much. So it depends on how you feel. So research as much as you need to start the story. That's really the kind of level you should be looking for, because what you don't want is you don't want to get so caught up in researching that you never start the book, because that's not how you're going to write a book. How you're going to write a book is not researching forever. So research until the point where you have enough to start the book. The next thing I would suggest once you've done your research is to read 1 or 2 writing craft books. I highly recommend this because a writing craft book can help you think about how to write in a different way than you may have already been thinking about it. A lot of them can help you discover what sort of story structure you might want to pay attention to. And overall, if you're really lost on like how to write a book, reading a couple craft books can give you an idea of how you'll go about that process. Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to write a book different. People have all different sorts of ways of writing books. Even if you're using the same story structure, people will actually go about writing it in a very different way. You have to find the way that works best for you, but a craft book can help put a lot of structure into that process for you. And you may be thinking, Liselle, what craft book would you recommend? I will let you in on a secret. 2 craft books I really love are Story Genius and Save the Cat Writes a Novel, but I'll let you in on a secret. I've never actually finished either of those books. So I read to a point where I was like, okay, I get it. I've like got to go and write. And then I just went and wrote, and I never went back because I was like, I got out of this what I wanted to get out of this. So that may be you, and that's absolutely fine. It's just really helpful to look into a craft book and get that basis until you kind of understand how you're going to go about writing that book. Finally, in the research and prep phase, decide on a schedule. Don't panic, don't leave, don't freak out. I know sometimes a schedule can feel like, oh no, rigid restrictions, and what if I don't do it, and what if I failed my schedule? That's fine. A schedule, I use this in the most broad sense possible. So your schedule may be you write 3 times a week, could be 4 times a week, could be once a week. It doesn't matter. Just decide on a schedule that works for you and set aside dedicated time to write. This, I would say, is one of the biggest factors that contributes to someone actually writing a book, like writing and finishing a book, and someone who never finishes a book, is creating some sort of schedule for yourself so that you can help yourself stay on track. And sometimes there's going to be bumps in the road. Life happens. Sometimes you may have to take a break, but your break itself can be scheduled. So your break can be, okay, I'm going to take a break for 2 weeks, and then on this day I'm going to come back and I'm going to go back to writing once a day. As long as you are setting aside time to be serious about your writing, because that's how you're going to get shit done, to be frank. So set up a schedule for your writing. Now on to the step where you actually begin the writing. So this is called how to write a book, but really it should be called how to finish a book, because that's the goal of this video, is to actually finish a book. Because lots of people write books or like start writing books, but it's actually finishing it. And so this is where the actual writing portion comes in. Something that I think helps in the beginning is deciding what sort of writer you are. Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Or are you something in between? So a plotter is someone that does a detailed outline of the story before they begin writing. A pantser is someone that just kind of goes in and starts writing with very little information. It's kind of just in their head. And a plantser is somewhere in between. So they may do some outlining and some things they may leave alone in the middle. I'm more of a plantser myself. I don't like to outline too much because then I lose gumption for the story. I get bored. So when you're starting out, I would kind of recommend a mix of 2 if you can. If outlining in any way really doesn't jive with you, that's absolutely fine. You can just jump straight in. I find that when you are writing your first book and trying to finish your first book, having an idea of where it's going to go from the beginning can help give you that motivation to actually finish it. Which is why if you are trying to write your first book, I would suggest doing sort of a plantser method. So at the very minimum, thinking of what's going to happen in your beginning, and what problem your main character is going to face there, what's going to happen in the middle. So how is that problem going to suddenly get worse? That climactic moment where things become a lot more difficult for your protagonist. And then the end, how are they going to resolve that problem they've been having throughout the story? So 3 points, just starting with those, because that can help give you the momentum to continue forward. If you want to plot in more detail, you can. If that works for you, that would be great. But I would caution not to get so caught up in the outlining that you never start writing. The same as the research phase, don't get caught up in all this like preamble such that you never get down to the actual writing, because that'll stop you from writing a book as well. Now we're into the next step. Well, it's not even the next step. It's the same actual writing step, but you have to actually write now. So this is where that schedule comes in handy. When the schedule tells you you're supposed to be writing, do your writing. Sit down and get that writing done, or stand up if you have a stand-up desk. I don't know how you're doing your writing, but actually stick to your schedule and get the writing done. And I know it seems easy to say, okay, well now just write it, and now you're done and you're finished writing a book. I know it is not that simple, which is why I'm going to chat about some of the things that can kind of hold you back from finishing, and some strategies as to how you can push through those so that you reach your goal of writing a book. So first thing you may encounter, editing. Please try not to edit before you're finished the book. Going back and doing editing and editing and editing and editing can be a loop that you get caught in that prevents you from ever actually writing that book, because you're so stuck and hung up on going back and trying to fix things. You're gonna edit. You are 100% gonna edit. Honey, don't get impatient to edit, because you are gonna edit. But do it when you're actually finished the book, because then you can edit to your heart's desire. But if you're just going back over and over, you're never going to finish. Something else that can come up is you can get stuck. Not knowing how to go forward can be a really difficult situation, because it feels like you can't continue writing if you don't know what you're supposed to be writing. And for this, I find that a lot of times it can just be that you don't know how to go forward in a way that you think is good. In which case, I would say not to get caught up in being good. Again, that's something you can fix, but to just go forward and keep going along with it. If you are just stuck and it's full, like writer's block, your mind is just blank, you cannot think of a way to move forward, I would say stick to your schedule. Don't drop off your schedule and stop writing entirely, because that can make it difficult as well. Something that can be good is that you use your scheduled writing time to go through things that can help you get through writer's block. So use your scheduled writer time to go online and chat with other writers about what you are working through, and maybe they'll help you come up with other ideas. Use that time to read books or consume media that are like your book that can maybe help you break through that. Continue with that schedule, but use it to follow through strategies that can help you push through writer's block. And that way, when you have gotten through and you know what you actually want to write, then you're still in the schedule. Like, you haven't completely dropped off the map and lost motivation to continue with what you've started. Something else I would say that can help for writer's block is to sometimes write like a weird little off short story. It doesn't have to be weird. I don't know why I said weird. But writing a little short story or writing a section that's from a completely different part of your book, just to help you get in that mode and develop ideas. That way also you're still making progress. It's just in another part of the book, because you can't quite figure out what's happening here. Even if it's a side story that you know will never make it into the main novel, it can still be something that can kind of help get those gears going. Something else that might stop you from finishing your story is your own self-doubt. Maybe you saw someone else come out with a book that kind of seems like what you're writing. Maybe you're hearing that the book you're writing, that genre is dead, so you're wondering what's the point. Maybe there are other factors. You just feel like someone may never publish your book, that it may be too outlandish or out there. Those are moments where you really have to examine what you want to do and come back to the core of, I want to write a book. So don't get too bogged down with everything else that's going on, and focus on the fact that you want to write a book and finish, at least for yourself, because that's kind of primarily who this should be for. So now you've gone through all those steps. Some roadblocks have come up that have kind of sought to push you off track, but you've gone through them. You've used strategies to push through, and you finished your book. Yay! So that is how to write a book, according to me. Again, there's no one way to write a book. This is just my method for what I find works in actually finishing a novel. The biggest thing I will say that makes a difference between stories I've started and never finished and stories that I have completed is consistency, that schedule. And again, it doesn't have to be hardcore. You can take breaks. You don't have to write every day. You don't even have to write every week, though that will take longer. It takes the time it takes, but you do need to kind of set a schedule, because that helps keep you on track. And being on track is how you finish things, because when it's out in the air, it can be really hard to complete that. So the first novel I wrote, From 16 to 17, I had no schedule whatsoever. I just had a bunch of random scenes. And then when I was 18, I sat down and I said, you know what? I really want to finish this. And I consistently wrote for the first time and I finished it. And that was my first book I finished. And every other book I finished after has been consistency. And again, it hasn't been the same schedule every time. For example, I have a vlog over here where I wrote 20,000 words on a project and then I took a break, and that's a scheduled break. And then I said, okay, on this date, I'm gonna start writing again and I'm gonna write these many words per week or whatever, or I'm gonna sit down for an hour. And then I had a schedule again and I finished that book. Consistency scheduling can make a huge difference. It's made the biggest difference in my writing and my finishing a book. And so that's what I would really recommend for you. And that was how to write a book. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to me already, please subscribe. I post videos all about writing and traditional publishing and my own journey as an author. I also do interviews with other authors. If you have any other questions about how to write a book, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm happy to help you. Or if you have tips for how you've written books for other people to see and enjoy and consume, please also comment with those as well. And thank you so much for watching this video. Bye!